Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours, the live webcast where I go through and answer your SQL Server questions and Azure SQL DB questions that you post on the URL up on the screen there, polgab.com/room/Brento. Although this one's going to be a little bit different in terms of live office hours, the questions are already planned out. Up on my fancy little screen here, I have a list of questions from an office hours that I did in Maine, but for some reason, my camera did not record any audio. Oh, God. Renegade Larson, good to see you there. Just a total bummer that, and it was even long. It was Eve was waiting for Eve to get up, and we were going to go on a boat ride in Maine, and went for like 35 minutes talking about all kinds of stuff. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, okay. So I got all these questions slotted out. It's like 20 some questions already slotted out. So you don't have to type in new questions over on the PolGab URL. In today's webcast, and it's going to be a long one. I'm going to focus on just questions that I've already got queued up in the can. I was going to record it just offline, just by myself and in the home studio, and I thought, oh, well, why not just go ahead and do it live on Twitch so at least we can hang out and y'all can inject your own answers to the questions as well. VB Wizard says, good morning, SQL Master. It's really funny. Microsoft discontinued the Certified Master program back in 2012. Excuse me, 2012. Fighting a sinus infection. So I've been like on the fence about whether or not I keep using the term certified master. I've been on the fence for a long time about it. And I think this is going to be the year that I finally just let go of that title and start saying I just do a lot of work with SQL Server instead. It's always funny. Montreux, good afternoon from the Netherlands. You know, it's really funny, Montreux. I saw you have a bunch of pull requests stacked up, and I was debating, it's like 6 pull requests stacked up. I was debating whether or not I would live stream that. I'm probably going to live stream that on Wednesday, working through the first responder kit. Not that you need to be there. Montreux, your work is always easy to read and easy to understand, so that makes it pretty easy. So sometimes people will submit big, long pull requests with all kinds of stuff in there, and I'm like, man, I wish they were here so that I could actually ask them questions. So the other thing with this, with the questions being pre-recorded is I can't push a button and have them show up on the screen. So over there, they will not be showing up over there. You'll have to actually read and pay attention. So the first question is from Furcan, who says, hello, Brent. I'm trying to restore a database from SQL Server 2017 up to 2019, and I keep getting an error when running the upgrade step from 901 to 902. What should I do? What that means is that every time SQL Server bumps a database from one SQL Server version to another, it has to run a series of upgrade scripts. And sometimes those scripts have bugs. It's not your database that's the problem. It's actually a bug in SQL Server. So what you want to do is patch that SQL Server 2019 instance, the one that's doing the restore, patch that to the latest cumulative update, and you can get the list of cumulative updates from SQLServerUpdate.com. SQLServerUpdate.com updates? SQLServerUpdates.com? SQLServerUpdates.com, it's plural. And that'll give you the most recent update right there on the home page. All you have to do is apply the latest cumulative update. The updates are cumulative, so as long as you apply the most recent one, you're good to go. Next up, I'm so used to turning and pushing a button. Next up is from Pixma, who says, when I'm measuring a query's duration, I typically start by setting get date. I run my query, and then I set it to a variable, run my query, and then I compare the difference between the get date at the beginning and the get date at the end. Do you think that this is sufficient? It's fine if that's what your goal is. Me personally, I almost never measure queries in terms of like millisecond differences. When you get down to the point where you need to know by the millisecond, you're much better off looking at the work that that query is doing, like looking at the number of logical reads, looking at the amount of CPU time that it had, the number of spills that it did, and so forth. because on a millisecond by millisecond basis, you can have things where the SQL Server is busier or slower from one time to the next. You can have it where you have noisy neighbors on the same VM, all kinds of things like that. So I don't ever measure down to the millisecond. Hey to Chetan and Ringazine, who both stopped in. Hey, good to see you this morning. Next up, we have My Tea Got Cold asks, where should I go if I want to master SQL Server Management Studio? Oh, I love this question because there's not really a book out there on how to master SQL Server Management Studio. The favorite resources that I've ever seen are actually YouTube videos. If you search for SSMS tips and tricks on YouTube, you'll find a ton of free videos with all kinds of techniques that you can use. Even like 60, 90-minute long videos showing all kinds of tricks. I know Daniel Hutmacher has done one, Andy Mallon has done one. I believe that Michael J. Swart has done one as well, but I might be remembering that wrong. That's the place that I would go start. S. Leininger asks, back in the day, what was your first computer? Oh, my first kind of electronic device was Dad brought home an Atari 2600 for like video games. But my first computer with a keyboard was a Commodore 64. It was a C64 with a 1541 disk drive. I remember that really well. And there were all kinds of like pirate BBSs at the time, and I would download pirated games to go and play with them, or you'd swap them with your friends over floppy disks. And then, the other thing I remember is getting magazines with printed out programs, and you would have to sit there and type them in. Line 10, do this. 20, do this. And then if you type the whole afternoon, you'd end up with a running program, you hope, or if not, you'd have to debug it, which was a giant pain in the rear. Chetan says, looking good with the new hairstyle. This is called not putting any product in. So we flew back last night from Boston, and all my bags are still sitting downstairs. I haven't unpacked anything yet, so I didn't have my hair product out when I went and took a shower this morning. I could have probably gone down and put product in. I almost wore a hat just to mask this map up. I'm trying to grow it out longer, not like terribly long. I used to have it all shoulder length in high school and college. High school was still pretty short. College, it went all the way down to my shoulders. And I'm not going to go that long, I don't think. But I keep looking at James May, the former Top Gear presenter, who's now a Grand Tour presenter, and I'm like, that's kind of a cool hairstyle, especially as I start to get, I've got all this gray hair up there. It's kind of fun, so I'm going to see how that works. Next up, Derek Zoolander asks, when should you monitor query performance with application level monitoring versus when should you monitor it with SQL level monitoring? Just generally speaking, let's step way back. When the developers are happy with performance, then you generally don't have a lot of work to do from a performance monitoring perspective. So I like application level monitoring because it helps the developers understand if they do have a database problem and which queries it is. And then they can bring that to me and they can say, hey, this query seems to be running the slowest. And then we can go from there. That's really good when the developers are happy overall, but there are specific queries that they're unhappy with. When they're unhappy with performance overall, like the whole SQL Server is slow, then application level monitoring doesn't really tell you anything because it doesn't tell you why that SQL Server is slow. That's why you need SQL Server level performance monitoring. I would say that you could get by with only one of them, but in reality, the developers usually are best off with their own performance monitoring tool, and then the SQL Server DBAs can't get what they need from that tool to know things like wait stats, what's causing those wait stats, stuff like that. QEnt asks, hello Brent, if we face blocking problems due to lock escalation, is it a good idea to change the table level locking behavior with alter table commands? Generally speaking, for me, absolutely not. It's generally a bad idea because the whole idea with those alter table commands is that you're just going to let more locks pile up. You're going to let locks not quickly escalate to the table level. Maybe they're just going to stop with row locking only. Well, there are a couple of problems with that. One is that locking takes memory. The more locks that you track, the more memory that you're going to need for those locks. And I've seen issues where client servers have only done row level locking and they've drained the server dry of RAM just tracking the locks. The second problem is rollbacks. If you let queries take thousands, tens of thousands of locks out, and then all of a sudden you have a deadlock situation, that's way more work that's going to be involved in the rollback. The rollback will take a heck of a lot longer, and the application is usually down altogether during that time. So for me, I've never seen that be the right solution. I will say I've heard from other people that they've had very specific problems where it was the solution. I just haven't ever seen that firsthand. Next up, G Surgeon from the Netherlands asks, he's got a nightly maintenance job that triggered update statistics on a table and it used sampling. Since no rows were updated before the update stats kicked off, the stats weren't updated with the specified 100%. Okay, timeout, hold on. You got a couple of different questions in here. First off, if no rows have been changed, the stats update shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be doing stats updates on something where no rows have changed. So that's the reason why you set only modified statistics to yes in Ole Hollengren's maintenance procedures. The second part of this question is, how do I make sure that if I want full scans for updating stats, that I always get them? And there's an option these days, and I forget which version it came out in, if it was like 2016 or 2017. There's an option these days to persist the sampling percent rate. If you Google for SQL Server persist sampling percent rate, that'll give you whatever commands that you need to run at the table level that'll ensure if auto-updating stats gets kicked off that it will use the exact sampling rate that you want. Next up, Grant asks, does statisticsparser.com, the web app, does that accept pull requests? No. It hasn't had any updates to it in probably like 5 or 10 years because the basic idea still works. But if you have a question about it or if there's something that you'd like to see changed or you think you found a bug, go to statisticsparser.com and look at the contact info and you can contact Richie from there. Next up, Magda asks, starting in October, I will begin working as a full-fledged SQL DBA. Oh, yeah. Magda says, thank you for sharing your knowledge. You're absolutely welcome. My whole goal with everything that I do around, well, I guess I got two goals. One is to earn a living, but the other goal is to make it suck less for people on their way up than it did for me on my way up. Goodness gracious. I want to make it easier for people, for developers to become DBAs, for sysadmins to become DBAs, for junior DBAs to become senior DBAs, for senior DBAs to either become architects or consultants, whatever it is that they want to do, or be a database administrator for the rest of your life, which is really pretty cool. Next up, Artis asks, what's your opinion of SQL VM backups to URL with Azure storage accounts? Well, as soon as you say server level backups, I'm out. Not because there's anything wrong with them. They're fine. It's just because I don't do them. If you're going to do, and I'm not saying my clients don't, I do encourage them to do that in the right situations. But when you're doing Windows level backups, that's what the Windows level sysadmins are for. And I let them experiment with it, tune it, all that kind of thing, so that they can get all the settings right and get the fastest performance for backups, things like that. Next up, SQL Noob asks, hi Brent, what would you suggest is the best option to transfer a table with, say, 10 million rows from one SQL server to another, all in one go? When you say transfer, usually that doesn't mean keep it in sync. That means you're going to do a one-time copy from one place to another. So for me, the fastest way to do that is take the most recent backup from the source server and restore it on the target server. So that way you can just do a select into or an insert into on that target server, reading directly from the database. It's the fastest way that it's going to run. It's not going to impede other processes on the source server. You don't have to worry about network traffic, all of that good stuff. So you asked what's the best option? For me, that's the best one. If you would have said keep tables in sync, that's another matter altogether. Next up, G asks, how does Postgres blogging opportunities compare with SQL Server blogging opportunities? When you say blogging opportunities, here's the thing. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. What are you doing for a living? That's what you should blog about. Blog about the thing that you do on a daily basis and share the knowledge that you have. If you spend most of your time doing Postgres, write a Postgres blog. If you spend most of your time doing SQL Server, write a SQL Server blog. But otherwise, if you're just trying to find like the best blogging opportunities, that's really an SEO topic, and you're really focused, you'd be better off focused on, say, developers blogging about, say, C# or Java, because there are so many more of them. If all you're trying to do is become famous, for example, then that's the way that I would probably go. Go to the place where the widest audience is. Next up, Montro asks, hi Brent, greetings from the Netherlands. As you're aware, I put some work into the first responder kit recently. Do you like large pull requests, or do you prefer large pull requests that do a lot of things, or small pull requests that do smaller things? For me, all day long, smaller pull requests by far. Because when somebody tries to fix 5 things inside one issue, I got to read through the code and I got to be like, all right, this line that they changed here, what are they trying to do with this? What problem is this trying to solve? And does it solve the problem in the right way? Not like it needs to be perfect by any means. Gosh, you've seen the rest of the first responder kit code. But is it going to be safe in terms of case sensitivity? Is it going to work on older versions of SQL Server? Does it conflict with what the rest of the issue is trying to do? I know people think that I know the first responder kit forwards and backwards. I don't know the code forwards and backwards. So I got to do a lot of context switching whenever I move from one issue to the next. Having smaller digestible issues makes it easier for me to go accept one pull request, then go get a drink of wine and come back and go tackle the next pull request. Gin and tonic, whatever it is that I'm drinking that day. Next up, Eli says, hi Brent, we're struggling with page latch weights on TempDB GAM pages on our 96 core server. We're using 24 TempDB data files currently. The training suggests adding more files, and the documentation suggests jumping by 4x, but 96 TempDB files sounds like a lot. Well, if only there was a class that would teach you what uses TempDB and how to affect that. Oh, there is. If you go to brentozar.com and click training up at the top of the screen, there is a Fundamentals of TempDB class where you can learn what kinds of things typically consume a lot of TempDB space, what causes GAM, PFS, SGAM contention, how to modify your code or your indexes in order to reduce that kind of contention, and more. How much would you pay for training like that? $200? $500? Even more? No! It's on sale during the month of November during my infamous Black Friday sales. Go click on training at the top of brentozar.com and then click Fundamentals of TempDB. Enjoy. There you go. Also feel kind of bad because you're about to get a Twitch break. Those of you who haven't sponsored or who haven't subscribed. Oh, somebody says, let's see here. Montrose says, just thought it was my screen. Let's see here. Hold on a second here. Oh, it says my picture is frozen. Oh, how funny is that? Oh, it is. Okay, let's try hiding this and redoing it. Nope, that didn't do it. Let's try unplugging and replugging the camera. Oh, this is probably dangerous. Let's try unplugging that and replugging that. See if that does it. Nope, that didn't appear to do it. All right, let's try unplugging and Man, my technical problems are all over the place today. I mean, between having that other webcast that didn't capture audio, goodness gracious. All right, let's see. Did that work? Big money, no whammies. Yes. Okay, cool. So at least that's back. It's very funny. I couldn't see the Twitch chat stuff because there was an ad break thing popped up. An ad break thing popped up saying that there's an ad starting. There's going to be an ad starting for those of you who don't subscribe to my channel. Those of you with Amazon Prime, you get one free subscription, so you don't have to see ad breaks at all. But we'll go ahead and keep going there. Golly, I can't believe that happened. Next up, let's see. Mobius asks, what is the best training resource for performance tuning native SQL Server backups and restores? Good news, it's absolutely free. If you go to brentozar.com or if you go to google.com and you search for Brent Ozar, how to make backups faster, I have a couple of really detailed blog posts that talk about how you go about changing settings, how read speeds impact it, how CPU speeds impact it, how write speeds impact it. Search for Brent Ozar, how to make SQL Server backups faster. Next up, Marcus the German asks, hi Brent, is the buffer cache hit ratio value a server metric, or does it depend on the database in use? Marcus, throw that metric away, light it on fire. You never want to use it again. It's a garbage metric. It doesn't mean anything. I teach you which metrics to use instead in my Mastering Server Tuning class. Check that out. Next up, Peter asks, does including I/O stats or query plans in Management Studio adversely affect query performance? Yes, but the only place where it really hammers you is when you have a repeating block, like a cursor, that runs over and over again doing the same things. It'll generate a huge volume of execution plans. Other than that, if you're tuning the execution plans, tuning the query, by all means, turn those options on. You just don't want to leave them on if you're not actively performance tuning that stuff. Next up, ZappyDBCC asks, hi Brent, we have an application with a large XML column. We don't query it, but we added a query with where is not null on it. We don't query it, but we query it. Zappy, if you put where and then reference the column, that's querying it. SQL Server has to look at that. There's a cost to every time you mention every column in a query, and it will get slower. Zappy continues, the database tried to create a statistic which generated a storm of I/O. The query timed out and the stat wasn't created. Do you have a suggestion? Sure, go create the stat. You can create stats just as you create indexes. You can create stats manually, so that way you can do it after hours, whenever it's convenient for you. Next up, Herd of Puffin says, hi Brent, when you come in to look at a new system, are there any checks that you do differently if the database size is measured in terabytes? Oh, that's a great question. It doesn't impact the queries I run from a diagnostic perspective, but it does impact the advice that I give. And I'm going to give this the single slam dunk obvious one is backups. You can't do nightly backups and nightly CheckDB on a multi-terabyte system as easily as you can a smaller system. So those are the kinds of points where I say, instead of trying to do native backups and native CheckDB, what you probably want to do is SAN snapshots, restore those snaps onto a different server, and then from there you run your CheckDB, your figure out whether or not that backup's actually healthy, and then you shuffle that snapshot off to a more long-term repository too as well. Because if it's still inside the same SAN, it's not necessarily a backup. Things can go wrong with the SAN. Let's see here. Next up, Wanna Be Smarter asks, we're about to update a few SQL servers. The databases are at an older compat level. I think we should stay at the old compat level for a few weeks before going to a new one. Absolutely, and I agree. If you search for Brent Ozar, how to go live on SQL Server 2022, I've got a blog post that walks through the exact timeline that I recommend with clients about when they change their compatibility level and how they handle it. The great point there, though, is that you're already on exactly the right track. This blog post will just give you the evidence that you need to go back to the company and say, here's why I want to do it this way. Junko asks, what kinds of features are enabled out of the box on enterprise versus standards? I went through an upgrade last year from 2008 Enterprise to 2019 Standard, and performance got worse. Yep, that's absolutely true. The most common one by far is a reduced amount of CPU cores are available, or a reduced amount of memory is available. Other things that can get you is merry-go-round scans. That's a feature that's supported in Enterprise but isn't supported in Standard. The place where I would start, though, is I would start by looking at SP Blitz and compare the results of the two servers. You wouldn't believe, you probably would believe because you're gullible, but you would not believe how many times clients have told me, oh yeah, this server's set up exactly the same as the old one. And then as soon as we go in and start comparing, they forgot trace flags, they got memory configuration wrong, all kinds of stuff. So that would be really the first place that I would start. Second place that I would start is compatibility level. On the 2019 box, don't upgrade the compatibility level from 2008. Stay back on 2008 for a while and see if your execution plans mimic the same ones that you're used to. It may be that your database needs to stay on an older compatibility level. Ringazine says Clippy sets up servers. Sometimes I want to refer to some people in the staff as Clippy. I'm like, oh, buddy, yeah. Next up, let's see, Hamburger Sandwich. Hamburger Sandwich says, how do you handle max stop and cost threshold for parallelism settings when you have multiple instances on the same server? I don't. Whenever it's time, that concept is called instance stacking, putting multiple instances on the same OS. I do not, under any circumstances, ever recommend instance stacking. That's what VMs are for. Put in multiple VMs, each running their own instance of SQL Server, then you don't have to worry as much about CPU contention, memory contention, storage throughput contention. Yes, absolutely, you can have noisy neighbors that impact each other, but it makes your configuration way easier. If someone comes to me and they say, well, yeah, but we really want to do it this way, and we can't understand why we're having performance problems, I'll go, well, sounds like you do. You're doing something the expert told you was a bad idea. And now you effed around and you found out. I totally need that chart up on my wall. And then Renegade says the best advice is to listen very careful. And I do the same thing with my like contractors, consultants, anything like that who come in to service the things that I need, whether it's from a business perspective or around the house. It's like I hire you for your expertise. I am absolutely going to listen to your advice. Speaking of which, the backyard is done. It's going to be, at least as done as it's going to be, and we'll go from there. And then finally, one more. Montreux asks, in a recent webinar for a storage provider, Pure Storage, you had a deadlock demo on the Stack Overflow database. Is that code available somewhere? Yes, it's part of my Mastering Query Tuning class. I do blocking, locking, and deadlocking demos in all of my mastering classes, but that particular demo came from Mastering Query Tuning because it was about how to rewrite queries to get around blocking and deadlocking problems. So that one belongs in Mastering Query Tuning. All right, there we go. We went through, Renegade says, Silent Wolf, no sound, Brent, when playing your sound. I know, right? Like I clicked the button.
All right.
and it like clipped a little in terms of audio. So I know I got all kinds of issues that I got to work on. It's very funny. I mean, I stream using my Apple MacBook Pro, which is the same machine as like my daily driver. It's the thing that I use all the time. I take it on the road places. And so the slightest update will end up causing problems. There's all kinds of third-party apps that I use. I use a third-party app for desktop audio capture. I use OBS for streaming, and all these things have these different versions that come out. And then Mac OS Sonoma came out recently, and I upgraded to that. And geez, the OS has been fine, but for some reason the streaming stuff has been causing all kinds of problems. So Shane says my daily driver is coffee and spite. That's nice. Mantra says thanks. Need to convince my boss to get that one. The cool thing is that all my training stuff is going on sale during November for my annual Black Friday sale. I have bundles with all kinds of training, so keep your eye out for that. It gets announced the week before November starts, and then the sale goes on for the entire month of November. All right, so there we go. That was a bit of a marathon. 30 minutes altogether for like -5 for the startup. So 25-minute long stream. Whew, golly, I wish I would have had the good audio capture of this from the camera out in Maine, but it is what it is. So I'm going to call it quits here. I'm going to go on and got all kinds of other things I got to do now that I'm back in the office for the first time in like over a week. I'm here for like 4 days, and then we're going to Universal Studios for horror nights, Halloween horror nights. That should be a lot of fun. And then going to Palm Springs for a couple of days because we had a leftover hotel like credit that we couldn't cancel. So I'll be doing a couple of remote office hours. I don't think I can do them from inside Universal Studios. I don't think you're allowed to film inside of there, but I'll probably just film from somewhere in LA or Hollywood. See how it goes. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see y'all at the next office hours. Adios.